We all have those things in our lives that we take for granted that they're there. They're there for you when you need them most, and you don't really think about them outside of those times. They're bulletproof. They work 99.99% of the time the way that they're supposed to. For me, all reliable, always there when I need it since 2009 has been my Canon EOS 7D. This one is one of the originals. It has a single CF card slot, no second slot for an SD card. It shoots 18 megapixel pictures. It shoots 8 frames per second in continuous shooting, and it does pretty good in video as well. I've gotten some amazing shots from national parks like Glacier, Yellowstone, Grand Tetons, sporting events all over the US, and also just wandering around with it. I've really enjoyed this camera, but it's beyond time for me to upgrade, and here are a few reasons why. The number of actuations are getting high. Since it's a true DSLR camera, it still has a shutter action, and it's only a matter of time before that breaks. Like I said, it has a single CF card slot, no SD card, and for the sake of my workflow and everything else, it would just be a lot easier if I had a camera that used an SD card and not this CF. And the final minor issue with the 7D is there's no fold-out LCD screen. And as I've started to do more video and I've been trying to get a little more creative with my shots as far as photography, getting low, getting high, that LCD being able to flip out would make a huge difference. So I'm switching up the workhorse and saying goodbye, kind of, to my longtime camera, the Canon EOS 7D, and I'm upgrading to 2018's Canon EOS R mirrorless DSLR. So you might be asking yourself, one, why did I switch to the R and not something else like the Sony series or maybe something like the R5, the R6? Well, before we get into all of that, whenever you're looking for a new camera, whenever you're looking for any kind of new equipment, whether it be a car, a truck, a computer, a camera, something like that, you really have two things to ask yourself. One, what is it that you want to do with this piece of equipment? What do you need out of that piece of equipment? And number two is, what can you afford to do? What kind of money are you willing to drop into this equipment? So to answer the first part of that question, what I need is primarily photo with a heavy emphasis on video. For that, Sony and Canon are their two workhorses in the creative field right now. Nikon has kind of dropped off. They're trying to make a comeback, but I've never have been a Nikon fan. Olympus has disappeared. Then you have other camera companies that are more specialized in just photo, just video. So from that standpoint, it made sense for me to look at just Canon or switching over to Sony. So let's go with switching over to Sony first. And I pieced it out, I parted it out, and I thought about what would I need if I were to make the switch, make the jump over to Sony. Well, number one, obviously I would need at least one body. Number two, I would need batteries. Minimally, you want two, but ideally I'd like to have 3 or 4. Then you're looking at lenses and the glass. And I would really like to have 3 to 4 lenses. Like I already have 3, I'd like a 4th lens in my current kit. Minimally, I could get away with 2. So I was looking at 2 lenses, a body, 2 batteries. And I was looking at anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000 to switch over to Sony. I have a 1-year-old, I have a wife, I have a mortgage, I have a new to me truck. So financially, it just didn't make sense for me to sink $5,000 to $10,000 into a brand new camera system. I have owned a Canon Rebel XT, I've owned a Canon 40D, as you know, the 7D, and now I own the R. I've also been using an RP. I've been able to use a 7D Mark II and a 5D Mark III before, so I know the workflow with Canon. I also personally own a 70 to 200 f2.8 zoom lens. I own a 28 to 135 millimeter lens, and then I also own a 10 to 24 millimeter wide angle lens. So along those same lines, let's continue to talk about budget. I looked at the Canon R5, and it's roughly $4,000. The R6 is roughly $2,500. That's getting more into that more comfortable range, but it's still a little bit more than I was willing to spend. The RP that I'm filming on right now and that I use at work, that's under $1,000, right around $1,000, and that's what I was hoping for. And then the R comes in at $1,500 or $1,600 depending on where you get it. And then my current dream camera, which I'm pretty sure it's the dream camera for a lot of Canon users right now, the R3, when it finally hits the shelves and is available for purchase, it's going to be $6,000. So if anybody out there is watching, I would absolutely love you. You can sponsor this channel for an R3. So speaking of the RP, which I am currently filming on right now, I've used it for 10 or 11 months, and for what I've used it for, it is absolutely perfect. I have loved filming and photographing on this camera. It does really well in low light because it is a full frame sensor. It does what I need it to do at work, but it's a little slow. It doesn't do some of the things that the R does that we'll talk about in a second. But the big thing is that it has no real good sport mode. It only shoots 5 frames per second, 4 in burst mode, and I need more if I'm gonna go to a soccer match, a football game, something of that nature. And again, like I said, this one that I'm using is from work. And while mirrorless cameras aren't the same as old school DSLRs and SLRs where you get so many actuations with the flipping action, it still it makes me feel a little guilty still to use my work camera that I purchased with work money for work for these personal projects. So I wanted to get something and switch over, and it really did just make more sense for me to go ahead and bump it up a notch. And here are the main reasons why I went with the R over the RP. Number one is the 30.3 megapixel sensor full frame. And I know I have a video out there where I said that megapixels don't matter. And I still stand by that. But if you're able to buy the 30 megapixel camera, and especially if it's full frame and it does wonders in low light, I'm gonna take that, because the RP actually shoots a photo of 26.2 megapixels, but it is also a full frame sensor, so it has done great for me in low light situations. Both the RP and the R shoot 1080p at 60 frames per second, and I know that this is actually a hang up for some people on the R, is that it doesn't shoot 120 frames per second, but if we're being honest, if we're being real, I don't need 120 frames per second nearly as often as I would like just 60 frames per second. If I need the 120, I'm not above grabbing the GoPro Hero 10 and using 120 frames per second in 4K, maybe bumping it down to 2.7K and shooting 240 frames per second. Now in 4K, the RP shoots at 24 frames per second and it's cropped, and the R shoots in 30 frames per second, but it is cropped. But the two big selling points outside of what I've already mentioned for why I went with the R over the RP. The R shoots 8 frames per second, 5 frames per second in burst mode. So it's very similar to my 7D. When I'm going to shoot football or soccer or something like that, polo maybe, I'm gonna want more frames per second so that I don't have to time the shot perfect every time and risk missing the shot. And then the other thing too is the fact that the R takes the same LP E6 battery that my 7D already took. So I already had 2 of these batteries. Like I said, the RP, it shoots only 5 frames per second, 4 in burst, and it actually uses an LPE17 battery, so it's totally different than what I already had. And then there's one other major component to why I picked the R over the RP, and that is that the R shoots in Canon's C-Log profile if you so choose. And I haven't shot a whole lot in log, but I want to shoot more. I want to do some more almost mini doc series kind of stuff. I want to do more shooting with B-roll where it's in a flatter profile so I can bring out the colors that I want to, bring out the contrasts I want to. I don't have to worry about nearly as much blowout as is happening with this lighting. I've gotten very frustrated here recently during shooting this video as the sun has come out and it's disappeared, and I've gone from very well lit to blown out, and it is very frustrating. And so that is that's probably the final reason, those 3, the frames per second, the battery, and shooting in C-Log, for why I went with the R over the RP. Over the weekend for Christmas Eve, I actually used the RP as my backup, my secondary camera, and I started using my personal R. and I am absolutely loving some of the shots that I have got. And like I said, in low light, this thing just did so well. The RP did very well as well, but there was just something about the R, and maybe it's because it's the new, you know, that whole honeymoon phase is going on in my mind, but the images were just so crisp, so beautiful. I also love that the R has facial recognition and can track that instead. So between the C-Log and the facial recognition focus, I'm really interested in putting this camera through more of its paces, trying those things out, seeing how it does, and being able to do more creative things with it. So there you have it. Those are my reasons why in 2022 I am going to be making the Canon EOS R my primary workhorse, my all reliable camera, and I am just really excited about all the options that I have moving forward with this. I'm still going to use the 70, it's going to be my backup, but the RP is probably going to get put on the shelf and used just for work projects at the office. But I'm really excited about this. Thank you for watching. If you don't already, please hit that subscribe button, hit the like button. I really greatly appreciate it. And you know what? If you feel I made a mistake, if you think I should have gone with the R5, the R6, waited for the R3 if I can actually ever afford something like that. If you think I should have gone Sony, Olympus, or something like that, drop it down in the comments. I love interacting. I really have enjoyed interacting with people on my Mini 2 review, and I'd like to keep that going. So if you have some opinions on what you think I should do with either this camera or other cameras, I'd love to hear about it, and I'd love to talk with you about it down in the comments below. Otherwise, I will catch you in the next video, probably in 2022.